Game Week 14 wildcard is active for a lot of FPL managers out there, and in this video, I'm going to reveal the best wildcard team to build going into this weekend. And even if you're a manager that isn't on wildcard, maybe you've used it in the past or are waiting till later on in the season, this video is still for you, as I'm going to discuss the best long-term picks over this busy festive schedule. So as always, if you're looking forward to today's video, please do drop a like. Aim for 150 on this video, and if you can, smash that subscribe button. It is always appreciated. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So quickly, before we get into the specifics of the players you should be selecting for your wildcard team, I just want to give you my one piece of advice if you are building a wildcard team or generally buying players right now, and that is to pick the players that are expected to play the most minutes for their teams. The December period is ridiculous for FPL deadlines. We have one every 4 days practically, and it means those players that play the 90 minutes for their teams are just absolute FPL gold. If you start to be clever and go for the rotation risk like a Darwin Núñez, for example, I think it is going to burn you in the long run. Those reliable players that tick over, play 90 minutes, those Bruno Fernandezes, for example, are the ones to go for. And that is going to be the case for this wildcard team. So please do bear that in mind when you are making your transfers going into Game Week 14 or building those teams. So as the Game Week 14 wildcard goalkeepers, I have gone for Robert Sanchez of Chelsea and, surprisingly, Liverpool's Kelleher at 3.9 million. Now, that one might seem like a massive surprise, but if you've missed the news, Jurgen Klopp has come out and said that Alisson is going to be ruled out for Game Week 14, Game Week 15 and potentially Game Week 16. So if you're wildcarding right now at 3.9 million, you're basically getting the Liverpool #1 for at least 2 game weeks. And I feel like that's an opportunity that is too good to pass up on. So I'm going to put the fixtures on the screen right now for a Chelsea-Liverpool rotation. And if you were to go down this strategy, you would have Kelleher for the next 3 game weeks at home against Fulham, away against Sheffield United, and away against Crystal Palace. And then you basically have Sanchez from Game Week 17 onwards when the Chelsea fixtures become unbelievable. Now, although you're paying 4.6 million for Sanchez and it doesn't feel good investment for the opening 3 game weeks, this is a long-term move because I really do think a lot of managers are going to be going for the Chelsea defence eventually. So you're kind of just getting a few game weeks ahead of the curve. And in terms of the Chelsea defenders, I think Sanchez right now is the only one I can categorically say is going to play every game over this December period. And remember, that is what is really important. Getting those players that play every game for their teams. I would love to have Reece James in this wildcard team. Colwell could be one as well, but I can't guarantee they are going to play. And also with the defence that I've picked, it does give you a placeholder for later down the line being able to bring in Reece James around Game Week 17 if you want to. I think Raya is a fantastic alternative as an Arsenal goalkeeper, but you'll see with this team that I have sacrificed his position to go for other Arsenal players, which I think are better FPL value. So Sanchez, Kelleher, a brilliant double up in your wildcard team. Moving into the defenders, and this is where a few players were absolutely locked into this team, and that is going to include Gabriel and Saliba. As I mentioned, Arsenal's defence are fantastic this year, and I've gone for the double up of these two. I think Gabriel's had his problems this season, obviously coming in and out of the team, but I think we're starting to see Arteta just stick with the defence that he loves, and that is going to be the combination of Gabriel and Saliba. It is a little bit pricey going for Saliba. I do think Zinchenko could be a good option, but again, we're looking for those players that are going to play 90 minutes every single week, twice a week. And I think both of these tick those boxes for that Arsenal defence. And as I mentioned, I wanted to have a player in this defence that could be a Reece James holder, and that is going to be Saliba. In 3 or 4 game weeks time, if Reece James looks like an absolute FPL gold that we know he is, you could easily downgrade Saliba to Reece James and have him as that enabler. So these two, I think, are brilliant options for your wildcard team over this festive period. Now, I've gone for Ethan Pinnock at 4.6 million. And this is going to be the first discussion about how both Brentford and Man City blank in Game Week 18. Now, I know Mbeumo, Haaland are all going to be really popular picks, not only in wildcard teams, but in general. But we do need to note that they blank in Game Week 18 with a potential double in Game Week 20. So Pinnock, I think, for the next 4 is amazing, kicking off with that home game against Luton. And I think at 4.6 million, I'd rather have him over the likes of Mark Guy at Crystal Palace, for example. But again, please do note, they blank in Game Week 18. If you are building this wildcard team, you may need to look at free hitting in that week or making a few transfers later down the line. Now, with that in mind regarding the blank Game Week 18, it's really important to have players that have great fixtures in that week. And Livramento at 4.3 million ticks that box with an amazing fixture away against Luton. Now, I think a few people will look at this and think, Nacho, it's a little bit risky going for Livramento, is a bit of a rotation risk. However, I can't really justify paying the money for someone like Kieran Trippier with this wildcard team, mainly because he's also on 4 yellow cards, 1 away from a 1-game ban, which is a bit of an issue when you're paying 7 million for a defender. And then we also have Lascelles in that Newcastle team. However, Eddie Howe just isn't giving us any information regarding Botman. He could be out for another 2 months. He could come back next week. We don't really know. And if we're having a placeholder for game week 18, we know that Dan Burn is out for the next few months and Livramento is the natural replacement at left back alongside Lewis Hall. And at 4.3 million, even though I think short-term Lascelles is probably better at a cheaper price, I think long-term Livramento is worth hedging your bets that he is going to slot in as the go-to left back in the long term. So I'm going for Livramento. I know it's a slight risk, but realistically, we're playing Gabriel and Saliba every single week, and then it's all about just rotating Pinnock and Livramento in your teams. And Taylor's coming in as a 4 million defender. It's worth noting, I think Braithwaite at Everton's a good pick, but he is on 4 yellow cards as well. So he's just going to come in as default, and he actually has a really good fixture in game week 14 if you wanted to play him. But these are the defenders. I think they're really good and they work well amongst one another. No real premium. Trippier, Trent don't make the cut, but I think we've made sacrifices in the defence to afford the midfield and attack that I have gone for. Okay, so moving into the midfielders, and there are a few picks here that are just absolutely locked in for anybody that's wildcarding in game week 14 or simply just looking to buy players for their teams. Saka, Salah, and Mbeumo. These are the 3 for your wildcard team. I don't think we need to explain both Saka and Salah on penalties for their respective teams. Great fixtures. Don't think we need to overthink that one. And in Mbeumo, we discussed about the blank in game week 18, but the fixtures are too good to ignore for Brentford. In the next 4, they have Luton at home, Brighton away, Sheffield United away, and Aston Villa at home. Blank in game week 18, but then come back to Wolves at home in game week 19. I think he's the pick of the bunch at that price range. Now, I do think Jarrod Bowen is also a brilliant consideration for your teams at that price range, but we don't know the injury status on him right now. And if I had to pick one between the two, I'd rather spend less and go for Bryan Mbeumo, who is the penalty taker in this Brentford team, which is a massive consideration we need to have. Now, the big deliberation with this wildcard team was picking Son. Obviously, Spurs have lost the last 3 games. It's been 3 blanks in a row for Son. And at 9.6 million, it's a lot of money to pay for a player who is playing in a less creative team with the absence of James Maddison. And I get it. You're probably sat there thinking, Nacho, downgrade him to Jarrod Bowen and invest the funds to get someone like a Kieran Trippier or a Trent in your defence. And I definitely think that is a route that you could go for in this game week 14 wildcard team. But I just really like having Son in this team. I know that we could sell him and then want him back a week later. Now, I know Man City is a really tricky fixture and we're not really expecting much from both Spurs and Son in that game. However, after that in game week 15, they have West Ham at home. I think that's a great fixture. West Ham have really struggled this year, 4 clean sheets. Then they have Newcastle at home. Newcastle, very, very good team, but a different beast away from home, it is worth noting. Then they have Nottingham Forest away, followed by Everton at home and Brighton away. And importantly, in that blank game week 18, they have one of the best fixtures at home against Everton. And also what I love about paying the money for Son is, yes, it's a lot of money, but if we give it another 2 weeks and he clearly isn't the same player without James Maddison in the side, we can downgrade him to any midfielder in the game. If you were to go for someone like Jarrod Bowen, invest the funds elsewhere, it's going to require multiple transfers for you to go back to Son if he's clearly just one of the best players in the game. And I also do think paying 9.6 million for a guy who's playing as a forward in this attacking Ange Postecoglou team, I think it's a no-brainer. I think we just go for it. And if the team continues to struggle, then we may look to sell him. The other big deliberation is Cole Palmer. Now, I don't think he's as locked into the Chelsea minutes as other people do think. I think the introduction of Kunku is going to throw a spanner in the works for somebody in that front line. And I'm of the understanding that Amanda Broha is going to get a run in this Chelsea team. I think he's a much better forward than that of Nico Jackson. So I think someone has to come out of the team. And I do think Cole Palmer eventually is going to get rotated over this Christmas period. Remember, we're trying to target players that are guaranteed 90-minute men, as that is where we get the huge upside. So I think Cole Palmer is going to come out of the Chelsea team from times. However, 5.3 million for a guy who's a penalty taker. you just can't ignore that right now. Yes, he might be a sell later down the line, but until we actually see him come out of the Chelsea team, you just got to invest in him, knowing that you might have a problem, but it is just worth the risk. So that is the midfield. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, and last up, we have got the forwards, and I'm going to be a little bit boring here because you've probably seen Ollie Watkins in every single team for managers, whether they're wildcarding or not, and you're obviously going to see Erling Haaland. So I'm not even going to touch on Erling Haaland. That is just as essential as they come. But I've gone for Ollie Watkins. Now, I do think there is a discussion right now maybe to move away from Ollie Watkins, but as I've said, over this festive period, you just want the players that are playing every single minute, no questions asked. They don't come much better than that of Ollie Watkins. Now, to go through the fixtures for Aston Villa, they have Bournemouth away, then they have some really tricky fixtures at home against City, home against Arsenal, away against Brentford, and then importantly, in that blank game week 18, they have the best fixture at home against Sheffield United. Now, although they have City and Arsenal at home, Aston Villa at home are one of the informed teams in not only the Premier League but the world. They are unbelievable at home. And even though I wouldn't necessarily sit here and say that Aston Villa are going to beat these two teams, I don't think it is too far of a shout to say that they're going to score in both of those games. And the involvement that Ollie Watkins has in this Aston Villa team and the influence from a goal threat perspective, I just think you leave him in your team for the long term and forget about it. Yes, he might get an assist or a goal and not really get the monster hauls that maybe you think a Darwin Núñez might get, but you know you are getting no question marks about his minutes, and you're getting a forward in one of the most informed teams in the Premier League right now. So I don't think there's a question mark about Ollie Watkins. What I do like about him as well is if you do lose faith in a couple of game weeks' time, you could downgrade that to any forward in the game. So, for example, if Nkunku at Chelsea looks irresistible and you need to buy him, you can downgrade him as an option. And the same applies to someone like Alvarez at Man City. Alvarez has Tottenham at home, Villa away, then Luton, Palace, blank, Everton. The blank is the big problem for Man City. And if you do go for another Man City player, you're probably then really doubling down on a free hit in game week 18. So I think Watkins just picks himself. Now, the third forward is all about how much money you have in the bank. If you can go Cameron Archer, happy days. I think that probably is the route to go for at 4.5, 4.6 million. But Mabama at 4.3 million. Antonio looks like he could be out for a few more weeks at least. And we saw Mabama finally come off the bench for West Ham. So I don't think there's a bad world where Mabama might get some minutes over this Christmas period. And you might get lucky with David Moyes giving the youngster a chance. And at 4.3 million to enable funds elsewhere, I don't think it's a bad move at all. So this is how the team is going to look. As I said, we are going for players that have guaranteed game time over this crazy Christmas period, and also investing big money into some players like Son and Watkins, knowing we can use them as cash cows later down the line if we want to change up the complex of the team. And we've gone for Sanchez between the sticks with the double Arsenal defence, mainly because I want a placeholder for Reece James later down the line. And although Raya is a great goalkeeper, he's 0.3 more expensive and then doesn't give us that placeholder in the defence. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on this wildcard team. It'd be really interesting to know if there are any players particularly that I missed out. Please do let me know. What I'm going to do now is just give you a quick preview of game weeks 14, 15 and 16 of what this wildcard team would look like without any transfers. Okay, so as I mentioned, I wanted to give you a 3 game week forecast of how this team would look, just to give you a bit of an idea on why I think they work really well together. So game week 14 basically picks itself. You've got the Kelleher game at home against Fulham, which is fantastic and a real big differential as well, because not many FPL managers have investment in that Liverpool defence outside of Tsimikas. Pinnock at home against Luton's great, and then obviously the double Arsenal defence. The midfield picks itself, some great options this week, followed by Watkins away against Bournemouth and Haaland with the captaincy at home against Spurs. So you could roll out a game week 14 team, have investment in all of the fantastic fixtures, and still have a bench of Livramento, Taylor and Mabama. Now, coming into game week 15, you can see how the team would slightly change. Pinnock would potentially come onto the bench and we would use Livramento with that away fixture against Everton and just really hope that basically Newcastle put up a resolute defensive performance. You'd have Liverpool away against Sheffield United once again with Kelleher. You've got the double Arsenal defence away against Luton, which is fantastic. And again, I would fancy them to play those midweek fixtures because again, game week 15 is going to be midweek. So we're going to see a lot of rotation from teams. But the players that we selected here I personally think are pretty locked in for minutes. Maybe argue Cole Palmer could be a bit of a risk, but we do have Pinnock if we get any indication that Palmer might get rotated to come in for that Brighton away fixture. Not the end of the world. And finally, when we look at game week 16, again, the team kind of picks itself. Pinnock coming in for that away fixture against Sheffield United. The midfield looking fantastic. And we also have Watkins at home against Arsenal, which is a tough game. We would have Watkins up against our Arsenal defence. But again, if you wanted to, you could pull the trigger on a Saliba to Reece James over this period and get yourself some investment in that inevitable Reece James haul. But I just want to give you a bit of a forecast on how those weeks would look. I think this team really complements one another over this period. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 14 wildcard video. I really hope it's provided some value, especially for those that are wildcarding. But as I mentioned, even if you're not wildcarding, hopefully it's giving you a little bit of information on the players to target over this crazy Christmas period. You've got to go for the players that have guaranteed minutes. Don't be taking risks on those rotation players. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider dropping a like and smashing that subscribe button. We have plenty of content coming between now and that Game Week 14 deadline, so make sure you stick around, get that subscription bell turned on, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.